The internet has taught us to become these excellent shoppers. We compare, we rank, we review, we swipe, we filter, we optimize, right? After years of practicing these skills, we become really good at them, quite efficient at emulating them as well. But here's the question that I cannot stop asking: who's teaching us how to build? Okay? You tuned into another episode of Shay's Pretty Skinny, where we're doing everything except keeping it cute about self love, resilience, and personal development. So, lately, in the Facebook group, and that would be this week actually, I've been talking about looking at self and how we engage others has come into the conversation in this part of that series. So it's only natural that the topic of relationships come up every now and again. And people have asked me about relationships, but I always say that I am not a relationship counselor, expert, enthusiast, right? But I talk about that a lot with both women and men, and males actually tend to be very vulnerable and candid about their experiences and their relationships. So I think if we listen to them, right, actively listen to them, we would find it quite interesting what they had to say. Now, if I was forced to take a position, I would say that I'm more of an observer, if nothing else, right? In the Facebook group, I've been going through the 48 Laws of Alignment, and that's developed from my one-on-one conversations with folk that I've had when I was doing the peer support group and looking for more talking about life applications, like how do you apply self-love, what does it look like in my everyday, and trying to build resilience, right? And so I discussed the ability to change. That's what we discussed this week, and that included conversation about exposure, the practice patterns in our lives, and also media, because it's a very big part of us. So I figured we'd talk about bed in a bag relationships is what I call it. Now, when I was thinking about this idea, I discovered there are modern relationship theories like box theory and plastic bag theory. Now, whether or not you agree with those frameworks, it definitely reminded me that we are constantly trying to create metaphors for how people approach relationships. So, here's the metaphor that I want to add to that conversation. It's the bed in a bag relationship theory. And that's really just a representation of relationships where the terms are already established. You know exactly what's going to be included. Everything about the relationship is kind of coordinated and curated, right down to the matching outfits, right? You choose it because it matches the life that you've already designed, either in your mind or, what's to be expected due to family values and things like that. And if one piece wears out, you just replace the whole set. You get a new bed in a bag, right? It's very transactional at the foundation because the mindset is more of, do you fit my list? Okay, do you check my boxes? What's up? What you bring into this table? All right. The problem isn't that we have standards. So I don't want that to get confused. Having standards is actually a good thing. The problem comes in when we often inherit our standards before we ever examine what they really are. Okay? Or when we apply them to people that we're pulling into relationships with us. So we become consumers in areas of life that were once very collaborative. People say, oh, the old thing. Well, they learned how to collaborate even when the love was lost. All right. That applies to relationships, though. It applies to friendships, jobs, churches, communities, even self-improvement. I'm always encouraging to ask, not what's in it for me, but what can be built. It's just a better way to approach it, right? It's asking what's in it for me. It's efficient. It can work for a time, but it isn't necessarily creative. It won't withstand sometimes. It won't be able to make a pivot, right? And a bed in a bag, it is attractive because everything already matches. It already looks like the perfect fit. The comforter, the pillows, the sheets, the shams, everything coordinates. All right. We even create little lists. We know how much income we want somebody to have. We know what we want their height to be, their beauty, like what they should look like, if they got a big butt or not, what their educational level is, if they're humorous, what their communication style is, do they have emotional intelligence. We walk into dating like it's our birthday and everyone else is supposed to arrive with gifts, right? That only we're going to use. And so we forget that birthdays are celebrations. And so that's not a sustainable relationship model. That's just my opinion, though. But who designed the shopping list? Who told you that success looked like that? Who taught you what beauty was for you? Who taught you masculinity? Who taught you femininity? Who taught you about marriage and how that works? Who benefits from those expectations? Okay? Did you decide? Or was it assembled over years of exposure, whether it be church, family members, media, entertainment, movies, TikTok, Instagram, did I say music already? Friends, parents, podcasts, trauma, algorithms was being pushed to you, okay? When I started working in an office, nobody sat me down and told me how to dress. But they did suggest that I dress for the job that I wanted. And so after I was told that, I started looking at the people who had the job I thought I might want. And I simply observed what professionalism looked like around me for those individuals. And then over time, my preferences changed. I didn't dress exactly like those individuals because I didn't like pantyhose. So I wore a bunch of pantsuits. But the exposure shaped my choices. And my choices then led to exposure and invitations to spaces I had not been in previously and opportunities that I may not have gotten otherwise. So I didn't create them, they were already there, but I finally aligned with them, right? And relationships work similarly. We often assume that our preferences are just our own, but many of those things are influenced by what we've repeatedly been seeing, what we've seen modeled in our families, what we see in media, what's happening in our communities, and definitely nowadays what's going on online. And the question isn't whether you're influenced by it, because we all are, okay? The question is whether we actually take a moment to stop and ask, where are our expectations coming from, right? Where does this seem familiar? And to those preferences align with, like, do they align with who we are? Now, I'm not saying we have no agency. That's what I'm not saying that. But I want to invite people to see that preferences don't appear out of nowhere, okay? They're shaped over time by repeated exposure and personal experiences. And this connects beautifully to the alignment law I'm discussing in the group this week about repetition, building our patterns, and the ability for repetition to rebuild them as well, right? Because it's not true that people can't change. But I'm not going to get into that. The same principle applies to attraction, though. What we repeatedly see as desirable can begin to feel very normal or expected. And that doesn't mean that every preference is manufactured and made up, but repeated exposure can definitely influence what captures our attention, right? And then we throw our focus there, and that's what's going to grow. And so what we imagine is possible is shaped by our environments. If we don't curate them, what is it being shaped by? Now, from what I've said so far, you might think I'm taking the position that women only want finished men, right? You got to come ready and swoop me up no matter what condition the woman is in. And I don't think that's true. But I wonder how many men are competing against characters, right? Whether they be in the movies and novel heroes, whether it's billionaires, professional athletes, the luxury lifestyle influencers, right? The perfect husbands that we see in commercials and in reels, social media couples, so to speak. Likewise, many women are also comparing themselves to these highly curated images of femininity and relationships, okay? So now everyone is trying to become a product instead of a partner. People want to know how we got to BBLs with the ladies and becoming a product, okay? A product that a man wants. Now, I'm not arguing against standards because standards protect us. I'm just asking whether we've confused standards with shopping preferences. A bed in a bag isn't wrong, okay? It looks just as nice. Being coordinated is just as nice. It's just already finished. And so shoppers ask, you know, what matches. That's what shoppers do. But architects and builders ask, what can we create? See how that shifts the relationship from consumption to collaboration? Like, are you dating someone's current inventory, or are you dating their capacity to build with you? And I'm not talking about potential either, because potential can end up never materializing. All right. So I'm not suggesting that either. I can't tell anyone what to do, but I'm simply suggesting that we be careful out here not to mistake a catalog for a blueprint. Those are two different things. One teaches you what to buy, and the other teaches you what you're capable of building, right? I know this is going to piss a lot of people off when I say it, but that's why we're out here asking people what they bring to the table. And also identifying as one, right? When you live in your authenticity, the meal is already on the table. And it's always being served hot and ready, baby. Seriously, seriously. I used to think I needed to keep the meal off the table, right? Because I didn't want people to just take from me, to leave me with nothing. But then I had to learn I had no boundaries, and I was always compromising them when I did set them, right? I was always forgiving my standards about who I let sit at the table, okay? Some people must hate from the outside. They can't get in. You cannot let them in. And then one day I decided, you know what? I'm going to serve this meal every day, all day, because this is who I am and this is what I like. But I'm going to do something different and stop letting every hungry person feast. Okay? I had convinced myself that I didn't choose correctly when it came to relationships, and being the person I wasn't of value, right? If I kept operating that way. But the persona I developed, I didn't enjoy. I didn't want to be that person. It wasn't who I truly was. I was not the BITCH, you know what I mean? I'm a loving person. I love to love. But all that flipped on my self-love journey, and I decided I deserve to be me. And this isn't exclusive to relationships or dating. It actually extends to like our careers, our identity, friendships, personal growth as well. Because if you think about it, the environment doesn't just shape kids, right? It's very effective when you want to make changes. But the environment is also shaping us as adults. Every song that we repeat, every couple that we admire, every influencer that we follow, every algorithm that we feed into, right? Every conversation that we entertain, those are all quietly teaching us what to normalize for ourselves. When I finally learned to love myself, I stopped asking whether I was enough for the people sitting at the table. And instead, I started asking whether the people at the table deserve to have a seat there. See, people convince us, oh, that's mean. Nope, you really can't sit here. You really can't. And there's reasons for that, right? It's not, and the reason isn't about superiority. The reason is discernment, okay? Discernment. I cannot say that enough. But I'm going to stop bending your ear. You've been listening to Shay's Pretty Skinny, where we're doing everything except keeping it cute about self-love, resilience, and personal development.